I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. Good morning and welcome to First Parish in Needham, our virtual worship service this morning. I'm Rebecca Keller-Scholl and I am your worship associate. I'm looking forward to welcoming everyone back to our church at some point, but we're not there yet. So in the meantime, it's wonderful to gather with you on this Zoom platform. Our congregation was founded in 1711 along with the town of Needham, and we want to keep both the congregation and our church safe for everyone. During COVID, this coronavirus pandemic, our building is closed. We will be gathering online at least through the end of September, probably longer. We encourage you to receive our newsletter. Send your request by email to office@uuneedham.org or by going to our website, uuneedham.org, and click on Get Involved and then Newsletter. And you can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. So many ways to stay in touch. Both the website and the newsletter list Zoom gathering opportunities throughout this week, which is how we're going to be able to stay in touch right now and renew our spirits while not meeting in person. Our sincere hope and prayer is that these online services and connection opportunities will provide some emotional and social closeness that we treasure in our faith community. An important way to stay connected is by sharing milestones in our lives. We'll be doing that by literally sharing stones later of joy and concern. If you have not yet sent one by email, you should please private chat Janet Klein. You'll see her on the list. Just click on the chat button on the bottom and then select her name. And when the time comes, she will read your joy or your concern. You're invited to join in the readings and the hymns. We just ask that you stay muted during that time and actually stay muted for the entire service, but sing at home as loudly as you would like with great joy and glee. We will invite everyone to unmute for fellowship and conversation during our social hour directly after the worship service. This morning's worship is offered by Dr. Kathy Livingston. Dr. Livingston holds a doctorate in education from the University of Illinois, and her career includes teaching and leadership positions in kindergarten through 12th grade and higher education settings. She served as CEO of a nonprofit working with Boston Public Schools to help students strengthen their math skills and their resilience. In addition to serving as a consultant to higher education institutions, Dr. Livingston has recently been offering courses at First Parish on composing your own narrative, as well as a sequel, Becoming, in which participants complete a life review that serves as a platform for choosing future directions. This morning, Dr. Kathy Livingston will share her thoughts on why we will need to listen to our souls speak as we rebuild our lives and our nation in the post-pandemic environment. So please go ahead and make yourselves comfortable. Breathe deeply as we settle into worship. We are so very glad that you're here this morning.
Awaken to the mystery of being here this morning and enter the quiet immensity of your own presence. May the warmth of your heart keep your presence aflame.
In Unitarian Universalist tradition, the covenant is a set of promises the membership of the church strives to honor with one another and out in the world. Please say along with me from home the words of our parish covenant as are seen on your screen. We gather as a loving community to encourage and comfort one another. We gather as a diverse community to support each other in our search for spiritual truth. We gather as a service community to live our beliefs through action and care for our world. Though we cannot gather in person during this time, we are living these promises every day. Our first hymn is number 119 in your gray hymnal, and you can also follow along on the screen. The words and music will be up. So please join me in singing Once to Every Nation.
Good morning. This is the time in our service when we share the joys and concerns that are on our hearts. You can tap into the chat at this time, or if we have none, then we can proceed and just honor what is on our hearts at this time. Since there are none in the chat box, let's put in a stone for all of those joys and concerns that are closely held in our hearts and not yet ready to be shared. Thank you.
Please join me in a moment of a prayer, and then we'll follow by a moment of silence. Have joy and peace in the temple of your senses. Receive encouragement when new frontiers beckon. Be consoled in the symmetry of your soul. Please join me now in a moment of silence as we center ourselves for the remainder of today's service.
Maybe everybody's supposed to be muted. I don't know.
May we have the courage to take the step into the unknown that beckons us. Trust that a richer life awaits us there, that we will lose nothing but what has already died. Feel the deeper knowing in us, sure of all that is about to be born beyond the pale frames where we strayed confined, not realizing how such vacant endurance was bleaching our soul's desires.
This congregation has been supported by the volunteer time and treasure of its members and friends since its founding in 1711. This is the time in our service when we, the modern stewards of this church, offer to give what we can to build and sustain the world we envision. Our plate collection will be divided equally between First Parish in Needham and the Needham Community Council, a local nonprofit which runs, among other things, a local food pantry. As you know, the pantry can no longer accept donated food, but its customer list has dramatically grown during this pandemic. Our neighbors are depending on this service now more than ever. To donate to today's offering, you can use one of 3 different methods. For those of you with a smartphone or tablet, you can use our new Text to Give program. Just put in the phone number 73256 and text to that number UU Needham, capital U, capital N, space, plate, capital P, space. Then the $ with the amount you would like to give, all in one message. If you want your money applied to your pledge, please text instead the same phone number, 73256, with UU Needham, pledge 20 or pledge 21, depending on whether you want it applied to the fiscal year just completed or the new fiscal year. Follow that with the $ and the amount you'd like to give. And if you missed those instructions, they will be on your screen for a short while we listen to some offering music. If you'd prefer to mail First Parish a check, please make it out to First Parish in Needham, but put the date of this service and the word collection in the memo line, and then mail your check to 23 Dedham Avenue, Needham, Mass. 02492. Alternatively, if you want money applied to your pledge, just put pledge and the fiscal year 20 or 21 in the memo line. The last and perhaps the easiest method is to use our website, uuneedham.org, to make your donation. There is a giving button in the upper right-hand corner with a drop-down menu where you'll find an entry labeled Donate Now. Following that link and signing into your Realm account, you'll be able to fill in your donation information and choose a recipient fund for its destination, such as plate collection. Thank you for everything you are able to give to help support and sustain this congregation and the vital work of our community partners. Please take the next few moments to give what you can and know that it will be gratefully received.
Welcome. For those of you that I maybe haven't met in person, although I recognize most names that are on my gallery, I am Kathy Livingston, and today I am excited to talk to you about my thoughts about how this period that we're in is going to require that we listen to our souls speak. In preparing for my remarks, I give a lot of thought and I listen carefully for inspiration that comes from my inner voice on what topic seems to be pressing its way to the surface and asking for my attention. This year, even from the start of this process, I was quite clear from the beginning that the role of soul needed to anchor my remarks. Even in this period of social distancing, Zoom has made it possible for me to have ongoing connections with multiple groups within First Parish. As Rebecca noted in introducing me, I created and offered classes this past year that are designed to help us compose our own narratives. This work is often referred to as life review, and its true value lies in leading each of us to have both a greater compassion as well as appreciation for our life's journey. Some of us were so excited by this work that we continued to work in a sequel, which we refer to as Becoming Part 2. The title Becoming is borrowed from Michelle Obama's book and her insight that she pointed out that we are always in the process of becoming. Our growth doesn't stop. With a greater clarity about our own evolution, we can see our life's themes and the narrative arc of our stories. Throughout all of this work, I am continually reminded of all that I have gained personally from working with so many members and staff of our parish throughout the 20 years that I've been a member of the parish. Our work together has helped me deepen my connection with my own soul, and out of appreciation, I am dedicating the time that it took me to prepare my remarks to all of you who have helped and supported me in growing throughout the years. Those of us in Part 2 now have been together for almost a year, and our current focus includes examining how we can use our gifts to find meaning and purpose in our present and future lives. Janet Klein, one of our trusted spiritual guides and a member of the Becoming class, shared a message from White Eagle, a Hopi elder, with us soon after we were required to shelter in place. White Eagle offered us her hopeful and encouraging words to ground us as we experience living in this pandemic. She says, "This moment humanity is going through can now be seen as a whole and as a portal. We each have a choice if we want to fall into the hole or if we want to go through the portal. When you are taking care of yourselves, you are taking care of everything else. Do not lose sight of the spiritual dimension of this crisis. Have the eagle perspective that from above can see the whole, can see more broadly." There is a social demand in this crisis as well, but don't forget there's also a spiritual demand. The two go hand in hand. Without the social dimension, we fall into fanaticism. But without the spiritual dimension, we fall into pessimism, despair, and lack of meaning. I heard a similar message from an Oprah-led interview with one of her mentors, Dr. Bishop T.D. Jakes. He reminded us, with a quote that I love, that God has sent us out to our rooms for a timeout, with an invitation to figure out how we drifted so far from what we say we value. I listened to one of my favorite writers, David Brooks, who's a noted author and columnist, and he made this year at the National Cathedral on July 5th. His topic focused on finding beauty in a storm. He cited multiple examples of storms throughout the history of civilization, and he left us with these sources of inspiration. Be not afraid. Storms are normal parts of life. Storms end. Storms are moments of transition when bad things go away and new things can be born. They are moments that allow for creativity. In storms, we have two systems of response. We have the normal bodily response, which is fight or flight, fear and anger. But we also have another style of response, which emerges from our souls. What keeps faith alive during storms like now are the awareness of beauty, the essential goodness at the ground of our being. They are gentleness in the midst of bitterness. They are compassion in the midst of strife. But these are the acts that have the power to shock. These are the acts that have the power to open our hearts. These are the acts that have a power to shock a revolution in our culture and in our consciousness. The message from these writers is clear. Our souls are being called to commit to using this crisis as an opportunity to create a more just and compassionate society for all. I am aware that when I hear others' voices calling for guidance from the better parts of ourselves, it's a wake-up call for my own soul to pay particular attention. Allow me to share what I do not mean by soul, since I know that some in our community struggle with that term, followed by understandings of meanings of soul that resonate with me. When I was in my K through 12 Catholic school settings, I translated the descriptions about the soul that nuns shared into images of ghost. I'm not sure that the lovely sisters ever used the term ghost, but they did often talk about the soul in connection with death. They described that once the body has taken its last breath, and if you watch closely enough, you could see the soul fly out of the body. In my child's mind, I kept picturing an animated image of Casper the Ghost from comic books flying out of the body at death. Clearly, this is not what I'm talking about when I reference the concept of soul. Let me move on to some more meaningful descriptions of the concept. Parker Palmer, who has been one of a long-standing source of inspiration and insight for me, offers us useful ways to grasp the concept of soul. In his book titled A Hidden Wholeness, The Journey Toward an Undivided Life, he shares several ways of thinking of the concept. First, the soul wants to keep us rooted in the ground of our own being, resisting the tendency of other faculties, like the intellect and ego, to uproot us from who we are. Next, the soul wants to give us life and wants us to pass that gift along, to become life givers in a world that deals too much death. I want to repeat that last statement of his, as I find it really powerful. The soul wants us to become life givers in a world that deals too much death. James Hillman is another person I've read to learn more about the concept of soul. His book, In the Soul's Code, In Search of Character and Calling, he shares that we are called to use our gifts as we seek and enjoy a more meaningful life. I too find it a bit challenging to come up with a precise definition of soul. Instead, I am comfortable delineating the key properties of soul contained in the above definitions and that coincide with my understanding of it. I actually think of my soul as my spiritual GPS. It helps to ground me in a space that allows me to seek the truth and frequently moves me to get involved in ways and activities that lead to positive changes. It helps me respond to my unique calling as a life giver. So if you aren't comfortable with the term soul, even after I've shared some of these definitions, I invite you to come up with a name for your own spiritual GPS. Our souls lead us to that space within ourselves where we are able to weigh decisions and choices in their purest forms, devoid of the constraining expectations that we have experienced as prerequisites to being accepted as a member of the larger community. I find it compelling to explore why some are recognizing that our current circumstances demand a spiritual response as well as a social response. I don't remember seeing that calling in recent times. I think the answer is simple. Our souls are being called to get involved based on how much needs to be rebuilt. The vastness of what needs attention is also what makes it possible for us to rethink how we might create better solutions. The challenges we face are also providing us with opportunities to make corrections where we have drifted so far or in directions that don't serve us or others well. While many of the inequities in our country are not a new revelation, the pandemic has highlighted how the issues of race, poverty, access to quality medical care, working conditions, food security, financial stability, housing, as well as access to education, are all positively correlated with one's level of vulnerability during this health and financial crisis. If you haven't had the chance yet to glance at the fall issue of the UU World magazine that was delivered this week, you will find a timely article written by Naomi Klein. She notes that we are living in what has been now labeled the age of consequences. All of our culture's accumulated debts to our fellow humans and to the more than human world as well are coming due at once. She goes on to point out that if nothing else, the past few months have definitely put a lie to the idea that capitalist societies are incapable of seismic transformations during a time of crisis. I actually find myself wondering if history will credit the pandemic as playing a role in our awakening during this time. For me, the virus has suppressed much of the noise in daily lives. I think in allowing so many of us to pause and to actually witness the degree of violence and injustice in our country, especially against people of color. I recognize that our emotional and mental health requires that we learn to limit how much information we let in. As a result, sometimes it seems to take a horrific event or episode to finally get the public to pay attention. Coming back to the present, we still do not have a clear picture yet of what will have to be rebuilt or created when we are able to work towards creating a new normal. I think so many issues are going to require our attention. And here are a few issues that I think will be on the docket and will force us to listen more carefully to the best parts of ourselves. How will we continue to provide temporary relief to those people who are out of work until they can reestablish themselves? What do we do about lost educational time in our K through 12 settings? Can we actually measure learning loss? And if so, what steps might we be willing to take to restore our children to whole? Well, certainly higher education institutes and other service sectors in our economy will have to help retrain people for future employment. Is it possible that we may be asked to absorb some kind of tax that goes into supporting programming and services that provide the much needed benefits to all? We know that the pandemic has certainly exposed the weaknesses in our healthcare systems. And how can we learn from this? Is it possible that we as individuals will be asked to make compromises to move from our own healthcare plans to some kind of national system that guarantees affordable healthcare for everyone? I was going to say as I drive through Needham, but now it's more appropriate to say as I walk through Needham, I see all the signs around town thanking the heroes that have shown up for work and help us through these times. But I wonder, will we take the next steps and find ways to pay these heroes the minimum wage that they deserve, and to pay a just wage for those who take care of our children, our aging relatives, and provided other services during this time? As a UU community, what ways might we be asked to put our values to work in order to reduce the polarization in our country, the racism and hatred informing white supremacy that we have seen on display in recent years? We don't have answers yet for all these questions, but I expect that we will need to address them. I am certain that our souls will need to be woke if we want to find the best solutions available to us as we do this work on a national renewal level to return us to a posture where we pursue efforts informed by hope instead of fear. One of my favorite authors, John Meacham, writes in The Soul of America, The Battle for Our Better Angels, that while the American story has not always or even often been heroic, we have been sustained by a belief in progress in the gloomiest of times. Meacham reassures us. The good news is that we have come through such darkness before, as time and again, Lincoln's better angels have found a way to prevail. Since my professional work is largely engaged in educational reform, let me add a few comments about where I think our soul-based input will be needed in the educational areas. It still is unclear to me exactly what's going to happen in K through 12 settings. Initially, plans included not going back to school at all, doing just virtual learning. In some communities where the virus seems to be somewhat contained, it looks like there will be a combination of virtual learning and in-class learning. Now, we might ask ourselves, is this model ideal? My response would be probably not, but again, we don't want to let perfect be the enemy of good. And this might be the best workable alternative we have for the short term. I am hoping that there will be some school districts as well as entrepreneurs that are exploring other ways in which we can use social media and television to offer lessons for those that are not able to get to school. I was surprised to learn when I did some research that Massachusetts already has 2 virtual K through 12 districts within the Commonwealth. They are known as the Commonwealth Virtual Schools, where instruction is conducted entirely remotely at the elementary and secondary level. So things are changing. I'm not sure that there's any reliable way yet to measure learning loss during these times of social distancing, but if that gap can be identified, what options will parents and districts seek to fill in the gaps? Will we offer or entertain solutions like longer school days, losing school vacations, extending the school year into the summer as a way of making up lost learning time? Will parents and teachers be willing to change their lives around in order for their children to catch up on lost learning time? Turning to what might be asked of us in higher ed institutions, I'm reminded of an article I read by Stephen Moore this summer, who's a New York Times columnist. He reminded us as readers that we have had repeated warnings for some time now from our country's business leaders and labor experts that the wave of automation and digital technology will upend the workforce, destroying some jobs and altering how and where work is done for everyone. The pandemic has certainly moved the needle on his prediction. By May, sources report that over 50% of Americans were working from home. And it looks like this trend is likely to continue. And the interesting thing about the trend is I am reading that it has led to bipartisan support for training programs for millions of workers. If you follow some of this research, there are studies that show it's a link between a college education and the likelihood that one can work remotely. In order to meet the need for skill enhancement training at this national level, I am seeing increasing support for creating federally funded opportunity accounts. Isabel Sawhill recommended something similar in her book, The Forgotten Americans. This was one of the most popular and well-received books that we read in our Action Book Club, another wonderful collection of First Parish members who put in the time and effort to learn more about the complexity of issues confronting the health of our country. We've covered topics like climate change, gun control, poverty, ignorance, criminal justice reform, to name just a few. If this idea gains some traction, my suggestion would be to create training awards that are awarded to the individual, much like the GI Bill, rather than just giving money to corporations and higher ed institutions. Like other programs, there can be quality requirements put in place that restrict where awards can be used. In other words, an education or training program would have to apply to the right department within the Federal Department of Education for approval before an individual could use his or her work grant to attend these programs. The positive feature, I think, about allowing individuals to use the grant award at where they choose is that word of mouth, amplified by social media, will probably provide the most reliable rating system on which programs are particularly useful. Since late January this year, I have been working on a book that addresses the need for changes within higher education institutions that include a particular focus on preparing young people for careers. The book is titled The Soul Difference, and it addresses the changes that are called for by those working in these institutions. These are the institutions where I've spent most of my professional career. So I do have a firsthand view of what goes on there. In my mind, there's too great of an acceptance of mediocrity within these settings. We have forgotten that our work there is a calling. The work is fueled by the soulless engagement of many of those responsible for serving students. Happy to share that I was recently invited to submit a chapter to a book on women's leadership in higher education, and I was excited to learn that it has been accepted. I listened to my soul and took a risk and went outside the suggested list of topics that the publisher was interested in. I focused instead on the importance of all of us being centered in our professional work, listening to our souls, living our values in the workplace, and listening to your soul's guidance as you carry out your work. In other words, I was trying to follow the words of Parker Palmer, a hidden wholeness, living an undivided life, bringing your values with you. In closing, I would like to highlight some simple ways we can use to discern if we are listening to our souls during this time. These are practices we can begin now that will help carry us forward as we begin to rebuild. Here's a list of questions and ideas to think about. Am I taking care of myself, including attending to my spiritual self? Am I doing the work I need to do to stay positive and hopeful? Am I careful in my conversations with others to bring positive energy and hopefulness to my discussions? Am I in touch with my gifts? Have I thought about how I could use my gifts, both in a social and in a spiritual dimension, to help us renew and rebuild our country? In the words of author Sarah von Brecknock, our gifts carry us into the world and make us participants in life, and the uncovering of them is one of the most important tasks confronting each of us. On a personal level, am I taking time to connect with others as possible? Do I remember to smile and wish one another well? I recognize it's hard to see smiles if we're wearing masks, but I think our faces light up in other ways and people can envision the smile. Do I acknowledge small acts of progress because they can add up to a lot of change? In what ways have I adjusted to make compassionate connections part of my daily life during this time? Let me share a personal example. Once I had a better grasp of what this COVID could look like, I made a promise to myself that I would use this time well. In mid-March, I decided to extend my walking routine in the morning, gradually building up to walking for at least 60 plus minutes back then. Now my walk time has increased by 15 or 30 minutes. And it's not necessarily due to additional distance. There's a real pack of regular walkers out there every morning, and we've more or less formed an informal community as we wave and greet each other every morning. I also pay attention to all the houses that I walk by and notice people that are out putzing in their yard or their garden. And I stop to talk with these people each day. There's this wonderful gentleman, and he thanks me every day for making time to talk with him. I'm just struck by that we have to thank someone for making time to talk. So I think there's all kinds of interesting ways that we can form compassionate, caring connections, even if we don't know the other person's name. I would like to end by sharing with you the wonderful words that Lynn Rackless, one of our wisdom guides, gifted us with in one of our recent becoming sessions. She strongly reminded all of us that we have to get over waiting for the best time to start doing this work. We have the resilience, as she put it, to do more than just get through our current situation. And regardless of what happens in November, we have to be prepared to do the work that moves our country closer to becoming a beloved community. And we need to start this work now and not expect to wait until things get better. Lynn will be happy to know that White Eagle would agree with her perspective. In White Eagle's words, you do not help at all by being sad and without energy. It is through joy that one resists. You need to be well and strong. This is the resistant strategy of choice. Think back to David Brooks, who reminded us to embrace and appreciate all the beauty that surrounds us, for it motivates us to hang in there. Naomi Klein in the UU World gifted us with the notion that though the transformation required of us are huge, we are not going to tackle those alone. We have each other to lean on as we build a better world. Author Arundhati Roy reminds us that we can walk through this portal with little luggage and little baggage, ready to imagine another world. In conversations with my own soul, I am praying for huge doses of humility so that I do not become paralyzed by the belief that I have to be a superhero in order for my contributions to make a difference. Those in the becoming class they haven't said they're tired of hearing me say this every week, but I suspect that could be happening. I remind us all to let go of our supersizing attitudes. Our individual daily acts that reflect our UU values are a huge positive contribution to the social changes we desire. Each one of our acts carries a tremendous ripple effect. I want to thank you for joining me today. And as we listen to the meditative music to close our service, may I suggest you do something today that you consciously are aware it brings you joy. Find at least 3 reasons to smile today. Remember to say a few kind words to someone, and to end your day by calling to mind the ways in which you experience beauty throughout this gorgeous day. In UU terms, we need to draw energy into our UU solar panels so that we have the innovation, motivation, and energy to rebuild toward being the country we are capable of being. I extend to you from my heart, peace be with you, take care of yourselves and each other. Namaste.
We'll build a land where we bind up the broken. We'll build
As we close our worship today, I want to thank you for your patience as we navigate the technical intricacies of this online format. We're probably going to be here for a while. Please remember to look for emails from First Parish and follow us on social media for opportunities to connect. We also encourage you to check in with your friends at First Parish and to double check your own contact information on the online Realm directory. When today's service ends, you are all invited to stay with us for our Zoom social hour. As we extinguish our chalice today, please join me from home in saying those words written by Unitarian Universalist minister, the Reverend Elizabeth Selly Jones. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, nor the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
So as our final blessing and benediction this morning, may I suggest the following, again from the work of John O'Donohue. Respond to the call of your gifts and the courage to follow their path. May anxiety never linger about you. May your outer dignity mirror an inner dignity of soul. May you experience each day as a sacred gift woven around the heart of wonder. Peace be with you.
Thank you all for joining today's worship service. It's really good to see your faces. This is Social Hour. Thank you, Kathy, for today's wonderful worship service. In a couple of minutes, right now we're going to unmute and have an opportunity to just enjoy a cacophony of greetings of one another. And we'll also give you the opportunity to go grab a cup of coffee or tea, stretch your legs, do some personal care, whatever. Then we will regather for our formal part of Social Hour and our announcements and an opportunity to go into breakout rooms. So go ahead and unmute yourselves and say hello. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody now, and we'll go to our discussion.
Okay.
Rebecca, can I just add a concern that came in later that wasn't that I wasn't able to see?
Sure.
Anna Birkenblit wrote in chat that she moved her parents to Fox Hill and Westwood, and so glad that they are nearby, but is concerned that it's kind of a rough transition. So we hold that concern in our hearts, and thank you for sharing that, Anna. And welcome to your parents.
Thanks, Janet.
You're welcome.
All right. So I just want to thank everybody for joining us for Social Hour. Please check out the bell notes for details of Zoom links and passwords. Reminder, the church is still closed for congregational activities, even though the Needham Children's Center and ballet have reopened. Please keep practicing your social distancing, wearing your masks, and helping to protect your family and the wider community. Next week, we start back to our regular worship services, switching over from our summer services, and we will enjoy our annual in-gathering water communion service. That's September 13th. Since we can't gather in person, we're planning to show a visual montage of pictures of favorite water-related sites as part of that virtual service. The window to submit photos has closed, and thank you to those who already did submit photos. We look forward to seeing them next week. Many of the standing communities of the church are already beginning to plan for the coming year. If you are on one of those committees and you have not yet heard from someone how or when it will be meeting, please reach out to your committee chair to find out. Susanna is back in the office working her usual hours. If you need to contact the church office, you can email or phone, but please be patient with voicemail and email as she has a lot to do to help us get the church year underway. The same for all of the staff. Gail Lehman is our pastoral care associate for this coming week, but is unable to be with us today. If you find you need support in your personal life, please don't hesitate to reach out to our pastoral care team and our caring crew for the help and assistance. They can be reached by emailing pastoralcare@uuneedham.org. And we'll go ahead and list that in the chat as well if you want to be able to write it down. You can also leave a voicemail at the church office. If you missed an earlier service this summer, or if you want to see this one again, as Ross had mentioned, or another one, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can find them all there. We're going to break out into smaller groups for a little more informal socializing. You will be automatically and randomly assigned to a group with about 5-6 other people. As soon as you get into the new room, you can go ahead and unmute yourselves because you will be muted when you first arrive, and greet one another and have whatever discussion the group takes. If you need to leave at any time, feel free to do so. After about 15 minutes or so, the breakout rooms will close and you'll be brought back here for a final farewell. So, okay, let's go to our breakout rooms.